Hi, everyone. My name is Sean Lingus. I am a senior reporter with CyberScoop, and you're watching CyberTalks TV. I'm pleased to be joined by Karen Evans, the CIO of the Department of Homeland Security. Karen, thanks so much for being with us. I wanted to ask you, Karen, since you came into your new role, you've obviously been adjusting to the unpredictable nature of the coronavirus pandemic. And I'm wondering how the pandemic has affected how you and your job help protect the department's data, where there's a lot of remote work obviously going on, and it's really shifted the proverbial risk landscape. And I'm sure it's a handful, but I'm curious how you're addressing it.
Well, thank you for having me on today, Sean. I really appreciate the opportunity. And I appreciate the fact that you're asking about adjusting to the difference in the threat landscape. I would say that when I first came on board, the DHS really understood that change and what the team was doing here to deal with the services of a remote workforce. I think that I have an opportunity here based on what the mission is of this department versus maybe some other department that I would come in that already understood risk and understood what our adversaries' capabilities are. So for us to make a shift and to change where the analytics are actually happening and then to be able to adjust to that is not a big of a leap, as if I always like to use the Marine Mammal Commission, and they're probably going to be upset with me for referencing them. But I mean, the leap is not as far because it's in the mission space of what Department of Homeland Security does. It's been a wonderful opportunity here because they haven't missed a beat. The department pivoted really fast to be able to deal with a remote workforce in the telework environment. And a lot of the building blocks and the foundational pieces were here. They just had to implement them and scale them up based on the resources and the way the people had to shift out really fast. So it's really been a remarkable and wonderful experience.
And as you know, Karen, the DHS is one of the biggest bureaucracies in the federal government, 240,000 employees, so many different moving parts. How do you decide what is most critical in protecting? I mean, do you have a list of things that are most critical, and then going from there, how do you wrap your arms around something that is so multifaceted? You've worked in IT, federal IT for a long time, but this is probably the biggest, correct me if I'm wrong, the biggest organization that you've worked at.
From an operational perspective, yes, it's the biggest organization from that perspective. And as you're well aware, it's also the largest civilian budget, IT budget as well. So to your point about the prioritization, it really is still some basic types of questions about leadership, and then how does that cascade down, and then how do we work with component CIOs. So again, a lot of the analysis, a lot of the things are in place, but as you can imagine, the risk tolerance is at a different threshold in COVID than it would be if everybody was coming into a federal government space and you could secure things on-prem. So things that you wouldn't tolerate before, you need to have that flexibility. And then how do you then do some compensating control? So I'll give you a really good example of one key question that we ask senior leadership, which then drives down some of the technical implementations. So unclassified video conferencing, we're using it right now. What is more important? Is it the actual content of what is happening in the unclassified video conferencing, or is it the actual capability of being able to hold an unclassified video conference? And so it's probably more the latter, about I need to have the capability, and not so much the actual, do you need to secure the content of what's being discussed on an unclassified video conferencing? So those are two different risks, two different ways that you would protect that, but a really simple question. And based on us getting the answer to that question from our senior leadership, it helps with the prioritization of the resources and then how you protect it.
Mm-hmm. Good point. As you know, the career path of many IT professionals and cybersecurity professionals has changed a lot in the last few years. There's different skills that are recognized. Less traditional educational backgrounds are recognized now, and the federal government is gradually awakening to the fact that there's a lot of talent out there that you can't necessarily find at a four-year university. You might find it at a hacking conference or something like that. So I'm wondering, Karen, given your background in the private sector and the nonprofit sector prior to rejoining the government, you worked in career, the talent pipeline. How are you applying some of that to what you're doing right now? What do you look for in a good cybersecurity professional across the board?
So there's a lot in that question to unpack. We could probably have a whole day discussion on that, but there's a couple pieces. So as you said, there's a skill mix that we're really looking at. There's a couple of initiatives going on within the department itself and dealing with the Network Security Operations Center and how we are working to consolidate what's happening from a Network Operations Center and a Security Operations Center. That is really looking at a different set of skills going forward. But then you're also asking, how do I apply innovative solutions here in the hiring process based on skills mix and making use of competitions, and how do you bring that in? So I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to the Chief Human Capital Officer, who the team has been working with, and I'm really embracing since I got here, is the Cyber Talent Management System, which is CTMS. And so Congress has given DHS specific authorities to be able to actually put a system in place with rules that get to the point that you're saying, so that they can come in, do an assessment, and we can put them on a career path that mirrors what you can get in the private sector, both salary-wise as well as job path going toward the future. It matches and it rolls over, and it all is aligned with the National Institute's effort, the NICE framework, the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education. And it maps to that. So what it really then forces us to do is really look at that hard question of what is the right skills mix that we're looking for, and then what is the right number of feds to contractors. Do we need feds performing a particular duty, or do we need contractors that can do that? And we're in the final stages of really analyzing that, because we still have to put it in the traditional process of resource planning within the department and then within the O&B budget going forward. But those tools are there. And so Chico is working right now on the final regulations to actually announce those. And when that works, I think what we have here within the department would be easily scalable for what CISA has to do for workforce development across the board in cybersecurity workforce issues.
Great. And Chico is the risk management officer, or no,
it's the Chief Human Capital Officer. I'm sorry.
No problem.
It's the Chief Human Capital Officer. And so they have the lead for the rules, and they have been developing the overall assessment tool and how then that maps, because it's going to be different. So all of us are hired under Title V, and CTMS is a system, but we're actually got new authorities from Congress, and it'll be under Title VI. And it's specifically for cybersecurity workforce issues. So this is above and beyond like special pay and retention pay. All that's in the traditional pipeline. And then some of the other things under the traditional way that we would bring people in is we've worked with the Chico's staff again for continuous announcements. And you've seen federal agencies use this. The idea then is we'll have one that starts at a very like GS5 level that goes to a 12, and then from a 13 to a 15, because those are the breaks between when you're doing, you know, total technical work to when you bridge over to be a team leader and then a branch chief or a division director, and then get you on the path if you want to do more traditional into senior executive service and then become a chief information security officer. So we have both paths underway. So that a person can actually choose which way they would like to come into the department.
I keep going back to the risk management challenge that you have, and I'm sure you're aware of the recent Inspector General report that came out on this subject. assessing DHS's progress in some areas in information security, risk management, but struggles in other areas, including having sort of a department-wide approach to identifying threats. A lot of that report is redacted. I'm wondering if you just give me a sense of how you're going to tackle that and what is the most urgent priority with regards to that report.
Well, and I appreciate the opportunity to comment on that report as well. I think the way to look at that is that the department has a certain set of processes here, and it isn't necessarily, there's always a difference of opinion between where a point in time evaluation occurs, and that's what the IG does, and when GAO also does an evaluation. And so they're looking at processes to see how mature a process is. And I would say that a lot of what the department has done is that we're building upon the stability of processes that deal with respond and recover. So I'm going to go back to the NIST framework in this particular area, because that's what we get evaluated on. So the respond recovery piece is really strong when you look at that. So we're really focusing in on how do you detect and then protect, right? And so it's identify, detect, and protect. And that really, and you started out this whole interview on the threat landscape and how you can then look over the horizon and incorporate that into a very holistic approach. That's changing the paradigm in how we analyze the problem set. And so that is the skill sets that you're talking about bringing in new skill sets. So I think we have the respond recovery part down really, really well, and it's very mature. And so to build upon that, you have to change the mindset, even senior leadership in the way that they're looking at this. It's back to what you said about the risk management and what is the risk profile of the organization. But there's a complexity on it. It's not just what is evaluated under FSMA, but also we're taking a very holistic approach of how do you integrate that in, because of supply chain risk management. And then how do you look at the component parts and pieces, contractor support, actual hardware. That's the next evolution of the identify, detect, and protect. So there's several pieces underway that the former leadership here, under the leadership of Dr. Zangardi and also Beth Capello, who was acting, that there were pieces that Beth had already started, which is, for example, the NOSC that we talk about, which is the Network Operations Security Center. That's the next evolution that gets you into more identify, protect, and then I can keep things operational, because the more traditional model is shut things down, right, when you isolate and analyze. And so we cannot shut down the operations of the Department of Homeland Security. We have to be able to identify it, protect it, keep operations going, and then pass the information off so that it can be analyzed by, you know, network forensics people or our intelligence community in several different places while we are still operational.
Karen, thanks very much for joining us on CyberTalks TV. We really appreciate your time.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks again for inviting me, Sean.